We begin today the Gemara at the bottom of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom of the Amud. So here the Gemara begins a sugya which will discuss something mentioned before about katan eichel nevelis. What happens if you see a katan eating non-kosher food or b'chlal doing any iser? There's a bezdin which usually has the responsibility to enforce all the mitzvahs regarding any yid. Do they have the obligation also to stop this katan of doing this aveda? So this is a sugya which the Gemara will bring all different kinds of braises to prove this point, and then it will eventually come back to the mission that we learned before in this Pedic. So the Gemara, Rav Yitzchak bar Bizne, irchesele mafteche de bei medrashe b'reshus harabim. So Rav Yitzchak bar Bizne lost the keys of the Beis Medrash in the Reshus harabim and b'Shabbat. This was on Shabbos, so he can't carry. So he's somewhere it's in the Reshus harabim. He's going to find it on Shabbos. He can't carry from the Reshus harabim to bring the keys to open the Beis Medrash. So he was looking for some kind of a eitzah, how to be able to get these keys to be able to open the Beis Medrash on Shabbos. So he came to Rav Padas to ask him what to do. Amalei, Rav Padas tells him, here, this is what you should do. Zil devar tali v'talya. Go and take a child, a young boy, a young girl, and let them walk around, let them play around over there in that area where you lost the key. And then what's going to happen? Then if they're going to find your key, they're going to bring you the key into the Reshus HaYachid, and you'll be able to open the Beis Medrash. So in other words, have them. You're not allowed to tell them. He's not telling them to tell them find the key and carry it for me, but without telling them. Just have them play there and they'll discover the key on their own, and as children usually do, they'll bring their key on their own to you. That's the eitzah that Bar Padas gave him for this lost key. Says the Gemara, Alma, what do I see over here? From this Kesava that Padas holds, katan eichel nevelis. If a katan is eating nevela, or for that matter, any not kosher food or doing any other aveda, ein bezdin mitzuvin lafrishay, and you see that they're doing it, and the bezdin does not have an obligation to separate him from this aveda. Again, by a gadol, if Bezdin sees a gadol doing an aveda, Bezdin does have an obligation to separate a yid from doing an aveda, but not by a katan. So now, shall we say we could bring a raya to what Bar Padas said? So there's another brayse that says as follows: a person should not say to a child, "Havali mafteach," bring me a key. This is on Shabbos. You can't tell a child, "Carry me this key on Shabbos." Havali chaysim, or bring me this chaysim that I need, this seal that he needs, or a ring or a seal to carry it in the Reshus harabim on Shabbos. Ella manichai tailish, you can allow the child to walk on grass and to pull out grass and zayrik and to throw things in the Reshus harabim. You're not allowed to tell him to do this iser, but you can allow him if he does it on his own, and you don't have to stop him. So you see it clearly in the Brayse, exactly the point that Bar Padas said, that if a child does an Isser on his own, you don't have to stop him. So Abaye says, Tailish ba'atzis shein and nokov. That Brayse may be talking about a child that's pulling out from a plant, from a flower pot that's not a perforated flower pot. And in Atayre, there's no Isser to pull out from there anything. So the child is only doing Isser Midrabanan. Maybe if a child does Isser Midrabanan, then you don't have to stop him. Or Zayrik b'Karmelis. When it says that he's throwing things on Shabbos, he was throwing it in a Karmelis d'Rabbanan, which is only a place where only Midrabbanan you're not allowed to carry their 4 amas. It's not a Reshus harabim. But if a child is doing Ism and Atayre, maybe you do have to stop him. So there's no raya from there. Before I go weiter, let me just explain 2 points regarding what the Gemara says here. First of all, interesting that Achronim speak about this whole thing that the Gemara talks about here regarding whether you have to stop a child that's doing an Aveda or not. And some Achronim say the question basically is, do you say that a child that's not obligated in mitzvahs, he really does have the mitzvah, but because he doesn't have the das to be responsible, he doesn't get an einish, he doesn't get a consequence for it. But in essence, a child is obligated in the mitzvah. If that's the case, Bezdin should have to stop him. Or, no, what Bar Padas is saying really is that it goes a step further. A child is not just putted from the consequence. Because he has no das, he's not included in the mitzvah in the first place. He hasn't been commanded at all. And therefore, if you see him doing this Aveda, for him it's not an Aveda. There's no reason for Bezdin to stop him. That's one interesting point in this Gemara. Another important point in this Gemara is what the Rambam says, and the Alter Rebbe brings this in Shulchan Aruch as well, in Siman Shin Mem Gimel and Hilchos Shabbos. There the Alter Rebbe discusses all the details about this whole concept about a child. And the Rambam says everything the Gemara is speaking about is regarding a Bezdin. That the Bezdin doesn't have the obligation to stop a child doing an Aveda. And this is the halacha, by the way. But a father, which has obligation of chinuch, So even if the child is not obligated, but mitzad chinuch, if a father sees a child doing an aveda, he has an obligation to educate him and to tell him what the right thing is to do. So whatever the Gemara is saying here does not apply to a father. Okay. Now the Gemara, as I said, will try to bring other rayas to this question. Toshema, let's bring a raya. So the Brisa says as follows: Oivi kechavim, or this may be actually a Mishnah, Masechta Shabbos. Oivi kechavim shabal lechabes, a guy that comes to extinguish a fire that's burning on Shabbos in your house. So you're not allowed to tell him, go put out the fire for me. You're not allowed to have a guy do a malacha for you by you telling him to do it. And you also don't have to tell him not to. You don't have to stop him from extinguishing the fire. Because the obligation of the guy not doing this work is not upon you. So if he wants to go and put out the fire on his own, you don't have to stop him. A child that comes to put out the fire, so here the father has an obligation to tell the child, or not only the father actually, the bezdin, whoever is there has to tell the child, don't put out the fire that is. Because that the child should not be Mechal Shabbos, that's our obligation, to be sure that the child is not Mechal Shabbos. So over here, you see clearly that a child, if you see him putting out a fire on Shabbos, which is one of the Alamat Tes Malachas, you have to stop him. Not like Bar Padah says, when a child carries or does a Malacha on Shabbos, you don't have to stop him. Rabbi Yechanan says, Ba'oisa al das aviv. Over there, when a child puts out a fire, and he sees his father standing there, his house is burning, and the child comes along and puts out the fire, he knows that his father wants him to put out the fire. And he's basically doing it for his father's sake. So in such a case, he's not just doing it for himself. A child does something for himself, you don't have to stop him. But if he's doing it for his father's sake, then you have the obligation to stop him. Says the Gemara, if that's the case regarding the child, doesn't that mean that when that Mishnah was speaking about the guy putting out the fire, it was also a guy that was doing it for the sake of the Yid? And what did it say over there? When the guy puts out the fire for you, you don't have to stop him. Why not? Mi shari ovid kechavim? Is a guy allowed to put out a fire for your sake? Says the Gemara, no, a guy is different. Adaita the nafshei yavid. When a guy sees a fire burning and he puts out the fire, why does he want to put out the fire? Because he knows if he's going to put out the fire, he's going to get some benefit, you're going to pay him for it, you're going to reward him for it. So he's really doing it, having himself as in mind. He's not thinking about you. A child that's doing something, he's not necessarily thinking of the reward he's going to get. He sees his father so upset, so he's putting out the fire for the sake of the Yid, for the father. But a guy is doing it for himself, he's thinking for his own benefit. So therefore, over there, you could allow the guy to do it. Another raya, Toshema, so it says, Ben Chover, Shirogel Lelech Etzel Avi, Mai, Am Haaretz. So you have a Ben Chover. A Chover is a person that you can trust the produce of this house, that the Meiseris were taken and the Truma is taken. So this is a Ben Chover, a child that grew up in a home that's a Chover, that all the Meiser and Truma is trusted that it was taken. But he goes and visits his grandfather, his mother's father, Am Haaretz, and he is an Am Haaretz. In other words, he's a person that we can't trust with Trumas and Meiseris and so on. So we don't have to be concerned that maybe the grandfather will feed him food that the Meiseris was not taken from it. If you find in his hands and he has fruits that he's eating that he took from his grandfather's house that was an Am Haaretz, you don't have to be concerned about it. You could allow him to eat from his grandfather's house, even though he's an Am Haaretz. So how can you trust the Trumas and Meiseris? The halacha of all the produce of an Am Haaretz, what's that called? Demai. Demai means it's a suffix. It's not clear if the Trumas and Meiseris was taken from it. So what do we see over here? You have this child that's eating from the father's house, and you don't have to be concerned about it. You don't have to stop him from eating there. So that proves the point that Bar Padah says. When a child does it, you don't have to stop him. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. So Rabbi Yechanan said, B'demai hekilu. Over there, because it's demai, when it comes to demai, where the whole thing is just a suffix, you don't know for a fact that the grandfather didn't take meiseris. It's just demai, it's a suffix. And actually, even by the Amaratza, most do take meiseris. So therefore, over there, they were lenient, and they did not, you don't have to stop the child from eating it. That's Rabbi Yechanan's answer. Says the Gemara, Ela taime de demai. The only reason why over here you could allow the child to do this is because it's demai. So therefore, we're more lenient about this. But if you see a child eating from produce that you know for a fact that the meises was not taken from it, you have to stop the child from eating it, and you have to take the meiser. So you do have to stop the child. So that was Rabbi Yechanan's answer here. But right before, when we asked the question from the case of the fire that was burning on Shabbos, what did Rabbi Yechanan say over there? The only reason you have to stop the child from extinguishing the fire was because he was doing it for his father's sake. If he was not doing it for his father's sake, you could allow the child to put out the fire because you don't have to stop a child from doing an isser. So the question the Gemara is asking is, these two answers of Rabbi Yechanan contradict one another. When you see a child doing an Aveda, do you have to stop the child from doing that Aveda or not? So there's a contradiction in Rabbi Yechanan's answers. Says the Gemara, you're right, and therefore we'll have to say as follows. El Rabbi Yechanan is fukim esapkele. Rabbi Yechanan, regarding this whole question we're discussing, whether when a child does an Aveda, doesn't have to stop him or not, he had a suffix about this. So therefore, koi hacha matchi. When you try to prove that you do have to stop him, so he pushes off saying that no, over there he was doing it for his father's sake. And when you want to try to prove that you don't have to stop him, so he tells you no, there it's demai, and therefore they were makel. Because he had a doubt about this, so each case he answers to push off the proof. Toshama, another raya, the Gemara tries to bring a similar case. Ben chava kayin sheragal elech etzel aviyah mekayin ha'maaretz. You have a child that grows up in a house, it's a chaver, he's a kayin, and they do all the halachas properly, and he goes to eat by his grandfather, which is a kayin and ha'maaretz. So we're not going to be concerned about the fact that the grandfather serves his grandchild tamei truma, which a kohen is not allowed to eat. Matzah b'yadei peiris, and you see the child has peiris in his hand. You don't have to go and take it away from the child and tell the child you're not allowed to eat this truma, which is tamei. So over here I see that you see a child, he's taking food from his grandfather, which is an amaretz, and it could be tamei, and we don't have to stop it. Says the Gemara, betruma derabanan. That brayse could be talking about truma, which is only midirabanan. So therefore, over there, they were makel to allow a child to eat truma midirabanan, which was tamei. But if it was truma minatayra that was tamei, you would have to stop the child. Tashema, another raya, yoinik tinik v'haylech ma'evedes kechavim. A child could nurse from a guy, or a behemoth tmeya, or even nurse from a non-kosher animal. Vein chayshishin, and you don't have to be concerned about this. It's read together. You're not concerned about the fact that he's nursing from an impure, from a not kosher place. But if you see a child that's nursing from a non-kosher animal, milk, so you can allow the child to nurse on his own, but you should not go with your very own hands and feed the child foods that are not kosher. And he can nurse from any of these impure, unkosher places, whether from a goy or from a behemoth tmeya, v'afilu b'Shabbos, and that includes even on Shabbos. Now on Shabbos, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, there's another issue. On Shabbos, if you nurse, if you're milking from a cow on Shabbos, there's another isser. It's toilda of the malacha of dosh, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, mefarik, when you separate something from its source. So even though it's Shabbos, you could allow the child to do this isser as well. Ubegadil aser, but for an adult on Shabbos this would be aser, and that would be even from a kosher animal. You're not allowed to milk an animal on Shabbos because of this malacha of mefarik, of separating from the milk from its source. Abishal says, our custom was that on Yontiv people would nurse, take milk directly, to drink the milk directly from a kosher cow, for example, on Yontiv. The Gemara will explain that in a moment. But what's the point? What do we see here clearly in this brayse? Katani miyah. The brayse clearly says, "Ein chayshishim b'yonik sheketz." A child that's nursing, taking directly from a behemoth tmeya, and we're not concerned. We don't have to stop him. Answers the Gemara, Hasam mishum sakana. It's a very unusual thing that a child should be nursing directly from a behemoth tmeya. It must be a situation where there's a sakana, and because the child's life is in danger, so we allow the child to nurse directly from this animal, even though it's tamei milk. If this brayse is speaking about a case of a danger, so gadol nami, so a gadol should also be allowed to nurse. Why did it say in the brayse a gadol is not allowed? Answers the Gemara, gadol boy umdina. A gadol that says that he's thirsty and he's about to die and he needs milk, we need to have a professional evaluation before we're going to allow him. If so, a child that's very thirsty and needs milk should also need an evaluation before we allow him to nurse from this non-kosher animal. A child that needs to nurse milk is even without any evaluation, we assume that if we're not going to allow him to drink the milk, he could die. And a child does not need a special evaluation. An adult, though, could survive, and he will need a special evaluation before we're going to allow him to drink this milk that's not allowed for him. Then the Gemara here just goes off for a second to explain what it said in the Braisa. It said, our custom was that we did nurse from a non-kosher animal on Yontif. Fragt the Gemara, heichi dami, what's the case here? If they did such an unusual thing to nurse directly from a non-kosher animal is because there was a sakana, then afilu b'Shabbos nami, that should be allowed on Shabbos as well. V'deleka sakana, and if there is no sakana, then afilu b'Yom Tov aser. So then on Yom Tov should be aser as well. And says the Gemara, lo tzriche de iketzaira. The case that we're speaking about over here is not that there's a sakana, but there's a tsar. The person's very thirsty and he's looking for milk to drink. And therefore the Tana of Abishal that is holds mefarik kila achar yadhu. This is mefarik, which again, as I said before, is the tilde of dash. Another malacha which is similar to mefarik, which is schita. When you squeeze out a lemon, for example, you're squeezing out the juice that's inside the lemon, extracting that juice. Same thing over here when you extract the milk when you nurse. So, but it's kla'acha yad though. It's an unusual way. No one usually nurses directly from the cow. So therefore it's mefarik, you are separating the milk from the udders of the cow, but it's done in an unusual way. So Shabbos, this is skila. Shabbos, which is a more severe isser, it's skila. So gazr rabbana. So over there chacham wa geyser, that even though it's kla'acha yad, it's still forbidden. Yontif, the Isser lav, Yontif, the Isser of the Malach is only a lav, it's a lighter Isser, so legazr be'rabbanan. Chachamim will not geyser to asa the Malacha that's done in the unusual manner. Minatayre, any Malacha done in an unusual manner is permitted. So therefore Yontif, because it's only Isser lav, their Chacham will not geyser. Tashema, going back to the subject we're speaking about, if you could allow a child that's doing Isser to do it. So it says in the Braisa as follows. The pasuk says, "Lo yisaychlum ki sheketzeim." You should not eat any of the shkotzim, any of these creeping, crawling things that are not kosher, and do not eat it sheketzeim. So the Braisa says the way to read the word of the pasuk is not only lo yisaychlum, but also lo yisa'achilum. Do not give it to eat, which means lahazer hagedolim al haketanim. That an adult has to warn the youngsters that are under ketanim to tell them not to eat things that are not kosher. So my love, don't you think the amar luhu lo yisaychlu, that you have to warn a child and you have to tell him when you see him eating it on his own, you have to go and warn him and stop him from eating it, against the point that Reb Pedas said before that you don't have to stop a child. And says the Gemara, loy, that's not what the Braisa means to say. Rather, what it's saying is the loy lisfiluhu biyadayim. You shouldn't feed a child these things that are non-kosher. But if he's eating on his own, you don't have to stop him. Tashema, similar thing it says in another Braisa regarding blood. Kol nefesh mikem loy seichlu dam. Any nefesh should not eat blood. So again, the Braisa says this is an extra pasuk, and it comes to teach me lahazir agedaylim alakatanim. The adults have to also warn the children. What does this mean? My love, you have to warn a child that's eating things that have blood in it that he should not eat the blood. Says the Gemara, loy, that's not what it means. Rather, it means you shouldn't feed them something that has blood in it, but not that if they eat it on their own, you don't have to stop them. Toshema, a third case which is again similar to this. Emoir v'amarta. This is in the parsha of the Kainim, which speaks about the halachas of a Kain that's not allowed to become tamei and so on. So it says a double lashon, emor and v'amarta. So this is the Rashi brings this, the famous Rashi. Lahazer gedailim ala katanim. So the gedailim have to warn the katanim not to become tameh. My love, don't you think this means the amalahu le tameh? You have to warn them and teach them and tell them not to become tameh, even if they're doing it on their own. Again, the Gemara answers, loy, that's not what it means. Rather, the loy letamalu biyadayim. You're not allowed to make the child, the kayin, tameh biyadayim with your very own hands. But if he's doing it on his own, you don't have to stop him. So now we have three different cases by shkotzim and ramasim, and by dam, blood, and regarding the tumah of a kayin, where the Torah basically says the exact same point, that an adult, a gadol, should not go ahead and be metame or make this child be over this isser. Says the Gemara, tzrichi, the Torah had to say this in all these three cases. Why? If it would only tell me the case regarding the shkotzim, the things that are not kosher, these shkotzim that are not kosher, mishum yisurim b'mashu. That's an Isser that's more stringent than the rest. Why? Because this is an Isser that is also even with a tiny drop. So Rashi actually says that the Mashu is B'kadasha, as small as a lentil. That's how small the Isser is, just like the Tumah of a Sheretz. is an adasha, is a lentil, so also the isser of eating it is also with an adasha. So because it's a more stringent isser, so maybe here the Torah is saying that you shouldn't feed it to a child. Avol dam, when it comes to blood, the isser in a Torah of drinking blood is only if it has the amount of revius. Maybe this isser of not feeding it to a child would not apply. Similarly, the Gemara says there's also a stringency regarding blood. Via shmin and dam, if the Torah would say this only regarding blood, I would say mishum deike kares. Someone that drinks blood or eats something that has blood in it, so then there's it's an issa of kares. So there's a very stringent punishment there. So that's why here the Torah is more stringent, and you have to warn a child as well. Eating shiratzim, maybe I would say it doesn't apply. V'yashmin and ani tarti, if I would say these two cases, I would say mishum di isuron shove bakoil. These are two isurim that is equal for all the Klal Yisrael. Applies to everybody the same. Avol tumeh, but when it comes to the tumah of the kayanim, emeloi, that's not an issa that applies to everyone equally. That's only for kayanim. So maybe I would say here it doesn't apply. V'yashminon tumeh kayanim. And if it would say only the case of the tumah of kayanim, I would say that shani mishum deribbe mitzvah siseris. Maybe I would say that by kayanim you see that they're unique and they have a special kedusha and the Torah gives them special mitzvahs. Over there, the gedolim have to warn the ketanim not to be over any of their averis. Aval, hani, but the others that are not in the category of kayanim that have unique special mitzvahs, eimeloi, I would say maybe this does not apply. Tzriche, so that's what it has to say all these cases. There's a long sikha from the Rebbe about this piece of Gemara here, right now, this last piece we're learning here, regarding Lahazik Delam Alektanim and Parshas Emor and Chelik Zayin, where the Rebbe discusses basically this idea of the adults warning the children refers to the fact that even though there's a big distance, there's a big gap, there's a generation gap between the adults and the children, the fact that the adults are warning the children is because there's a pintele yid that exists in every single yid, whatever level he's on. He's a gadol and this is a cotton, and there's that pintele yid, and therefore you could communicate and you should have to educate even someone that's on a much lower level than you. That's the point that the Rebbe speaks about. And the Rebbe points out and shows on each one of the svaras that the Gemara says over here, you see this nekudah, that there's a nekudah that's the same by all Yidden. Whether the Issa b'mashahu, that when a Yid disconnects from the Eibishter, it's even a mashahu. There's different things over here. The Rebbe points out everything. The Isur and Shava Bakoil, the fact that it's an Issa that's equal by everyone, that also shows on the fact that it's an Issa that it pertains to all Yidden equally, and so on. You can look in the Sikha, it's a very geschmack Sikha. Okay, now going back to the point we're discussing, if you have a child doing an Issa, do you have to stop him? So now we come back to the Mishnah that we had here in this Pedic. So Tashema, the Mishnah said, Shnei Yachin, you have two brothers, Echad Pikeach ve'Echad Cheresh. One is healthy, a Pikeach, and one is a Cheresh, he's a deaf mute. Nesuin Shtei Achayos, and they're married to two sisters, Pikchos, and both of these sisters are healthy women. Meiz Cheresh Baal Pikacha. So now again, let me just review, we learned this before, but the point over here is, the marriage of a Cheresh or a Chereshes is only a marriage midrabanan. Minat Torah, the marriage does not take effect. The marriage where the husband and wife are both healthy, that's a marriage minat Torah. So what happens over here? So the two brothers are married to two sisters. One is a marriage minat Torah, and one is only a marriage midrabanan. So Meiz Cheresh Baal Pikachas, the Cheresh that's married to the Pikachas passes away. So now this marriage of midrabanan, so he passes away. Ma Yasa Pikeach Baal Pikachas. The other brother that's married to a sister, and that's a marriage minat Torah, what happens now? Is there any yibum over here? So the answer is of course not. So this Yevamos that fell for yibum is a sister to his wife, and the wife that he's married to presently is a real marriage minat Torah. So therefore, that Yevamos, there's no yibum, she leaves. It's a wife, sister. Now if the reverse happens, Meis Pikeach Baal Pikachas, the marriage of the Pikeach and the Pikachas, and that's the real marriage minat Torah, and that husband dies, Ma Yasa Cheresh Baal Pikachas, the Cheresh that's married to the sister, but now their marriage is only midrabanan. So what do they do now? Maitzi is ishtei beget. He's gonna be forced to divorce his wife with a get, because the woman that fell for yibum to him, she's the real marriage. That's a stronger marriage, and therefore that pushes off this marriage that he's married to his sister now, her sister, which is only a marriage midrabanan. So he's gonna have to divorce his wife with a get. And also, ve'eshes achiv asur l'olam. The wife of the brother will be asur for him to do yibum forever, because it's a sister of your wife that you divorced, and therefore you can never do yibum for her, and you also can't do chalitza for her. If you're a cheresh, there's no chalitza. A cheresh cannot do any chalitza. That's the Mishnah we had before. Asks the Gemara on this, Amai moitzias ishtoi. This cheresh that's married to this pekachas, why would he have to divorce his wife? The issue now is that beget. Why would he have to divorce her? The issue is that he's living with a wife which is a sister to the Yevama. And how could you live with a wife which is a sister to the Yevama, and that Yevama is a real connection to you, because that's connected to you in Atayra, so you can't continue living with her. But the problem is, Teisiv Gabei, let her continue living with you, because you're only a cheresh. A cheresh is not mechuyev in mitzvahs min Atayra. A cheresh is the same status like a cotton. Cotton, eichel nevelasu. He's exactly the same like a cotton that's doing a isser. He's eating nevelis, and we don't stop him. So over here as well, this cheresh that's living with this wife, so he's doing an isser, but he's only a cheresh. So why do we force him to divorce his wife? Answers the Gemara, you're right, we're not forcing him because of him, but mishum yisura dida. Just like it's forbidden for him to live with this wife because she's a sister to this Yevama that fell for him, so too it's a isser for her. And she's not a chareshes. The case we're speaking about over here is that she's a pikachas, she's a healthy woman. So it's because of her isser that you're going to have to divorce her. Similarly, the Gemara asks, and gives the same answer, Toshama shnei achim pikchin, two brothers, both of them are healthy, Nesuin shtei achayes, and they're married to two sisters, achas pikachas v'achas chareshes. One of those sisters is healthy, and one of them is a chareshes. So again, one marriage is min Atayra and one marriage is min Rabbanan. It plays out the exact same thing basically. Meis pikech bal chareshes. So now the pikech bal chareshes passes away. So this is the marriage min Rabbanan. Ma yase pikech bal pikachas, the one that's married min Atayra to the sister. What does he do now? Teitze mishum achayis isha. That woman that fell for Yibum, there's no Yibum for her at all, because the Yavam is already married to the sister min Atayra. In the reverse, Meis Pikeach Bal Pikachas, the Pikeach Bal Pikachas passes away, so this is the marriage min Atayra. Ma Yase Pikeach Bal Chareshes, the Pikeach married to the Chareshes, which is only married with the Rabbanon. What does he have to do now? So again, the exact same halacha. Moitzi Esish to beget. He's going to have to divorce his wife with a get because she's a sister of this Yevama, which is connected to him in Atayra. And also, ve'eshes achiv b'chalitza. But over here, he actually could give chalitza to his brother's wife. He's a pikeach, she's a pikachas. He can do chalitza here. Fragt the Gemara, but the question now is, v'amai moitzi esishter beget. Why should he have to divorce his wife with a get? Teisev gabei, let her continue living with him. Katan eichel nevelesu. If she is a chareshes, so she has no das, so she's similar to a katan or to a katana. So just like a katan we allow to eat nevelos, we should allow her to continue living with him. It's not an issa for her if she's only a katana. Answers the Gemara, you're right, but it's mishum yisura didei. For her it's no issa. She's a chareshes, but he's a pikeach. He's a healthy human being. So for him it is a issa, and therefore he's going to have to divorce his wife. Okay, the answers of the Gemara in both of these cases seem to be very obvious, but it all seems to be just an introduction to the next case. Over here, we're going to have a case where both he's a cheresh and she's a chereshes, so both of them are considered to be like a cotton, which are not chayv mitzvahs, and still the Mishnah is going to say that he should divorce his wife when the Yevama is the sister. So let's see. So now Rava says, Toshima, what does the Mishnah say afterwards? Shnei achin, you have two brothers that again are married to two sisters. Echad cheresh v'echad pikeach. One brother is a cheresh and one is a pikeach. Nesuin l'shtei achayis, they're married to sisters, achas pikachas v'achas chareshes. The cheresh is married to a chareshes, and the pikeach, the healthy one, is married to a healthy wife. So now meis cheresh bal chareshes, the cheresh married to the chareshes passes away. Ma yasi pikeach bal pikachas. The pikeach bal pikachas, what happens now? Teitze mishum achayis ishtoi. So this Yevama that fell for Yibum, there's no Yibum for her at all, because the Yavam is already married, min Atayra, to her sister. If the reverse happens, meis pikeach bal pikachas, the healthy husband and the healthy wife, and their marriage was min Atayra, and the husband passes away, ma yasa cheresh bal chareshes, what does the cheresh bal chareshes do? Moitzi esishter beget, he's going to have to divorce his wife with a get, because now there's a sister that's up for yibum min Atayra, and you're married to your wife min Rabbanan, so you're going to have to send her away with a get. And ve'eshes achiv asura l'olam, and your brother's wife will be also forever because you can't marry her, because you were married to her sister before, and you can't do yibum chalitza that is either, because there's no chalitza for a cheresh and a chereshes. So she's going to be also forever. But the question now over here is, the wife that you're married to, why do you have to give her a get? Now over here in this case, dilav isura didayike, v'lav isura didayike. There's no issa not for him and not for her. He's a charesh and she's a chareshes. None of them are chayv mitzvahs. The katani, and what does it say here? Moitzi esishter beget, that you have to send away your wife with a get. Why does he have to send her away? Let her continue staying married to her, and that's it. Because they're doing a issa, and we don't have to stop them. Rav Shmaya, so Rav Shmaya answers, you're right, Minat Torah, they wouldn't have to divorce one another. Gzeira, however, there's a Gzeira here. Mishum Taras Yevamos l'shuk. If we allow them to stay married to one another, people are going to say, you know why we're allowing them to remain married to one another? Not because they're not chayiv in mitzvahs. People are going to say, because since he's already married to her, so he could stay married. And now the Yevama that fell for Yibum, she's a sister to the present wife that he's already married to. And therefore that Yevama does not have any mitzvah of Yibum at all. And therefore that Yevama could just get married to whoever she wants. That's what people are going to think. And that's a mistake. That's not true. Why not? Because the wife that he's married to presently is only a marriage with the Rabbanan. The Yevama that fell to Yibum came from a marriage that was Minat Torah. So really that Yevama that fell for Yibum is obligated to have either Yibum and Chalitza, and she's not Mutar L'shuk. So therefore we can't allow this present Cheresh and Chereshes, husband and wife, to remain married to one another, because that's going to cause people to make a mistake and think that Yevama is Mutar to anybody, and that's not true. So therefore there were geyser that he should give a get to his present wife in order for people not to make a mistake about this. Adron Allah Cheresh, this is the conclusion of the 14th Peirik of Masechta Yevamos. We get a new Peirik, and the last two Prakim here of Masechta Yevamos is going to discuss something which was brought up earlier in the Masechta already, and that is a situation where a woman is coming to testify about her husband that passed away, or there's an aide that's saying that her husband passed away. When could we rely on this testimony that her husband actually passed away, and when not? We had before regarding an Eid Echad that says this testimony. This Mishnah starts off with the halacha with a woman that says herself about her own husband, that she was with him and he passed away. Could we trust her or could we not? Now usually in Minat Torah, you would not be allowed to trust a woman for such a kind of thing. But if you remember, we learned earlier in the Masechta, there's a concept called Isha Daiko Minseve. Because Chachamim put such strong knossos on a woman, if it turns out that what she said was a lie, later she's going to have to leave her new husband and leave her old husband. There's such tremendous knossos that they put on her. So therefore, we do trust her to say that her husband passed away. But even so, as we'll see, there are limitations to this. Not always. A woman traveled overseas together with her husband. Shalom beinai lebeina, and we know that there's peace between them. They're getting along. And shalom ba'ilam. And there's also peace in the world. The world, everything is fine. There's no wars, nothing going on. Uba v'amra, she comes back alone and she says, Meiz Baili, my husband passed away. So Tinase, we believe her and she can get married. Meiz Baili, if she passed away and there were no children, so Tisyavim, she goes and has Yibum. Shalom beinai lebeina, but what if they left? And we know that there's peace amongst them. But Mulchama ba'ilam, but there's a war in the world. Or Ketata beinai lebeina, we know that they are not getting along. V'shalom by them, even if there is peace in the world. Ubas of Amra, she comes back alone and she says, Meiz Baili, my husband passed away. Einon amenes. Over here, she's not believed. As we'll see, the Gemara is going to explain, there's two things. If they're not getting along with one another, so then we can understand why she's saying her husband passed away. She wants to get remarried. And even if her husband will show up, she doesn't care. Because if her husband will show up, she'll be also to go back to him. She wants to separate from him. If there's a war in the world, as the Gemara will explain, she might think her husband died in the war or whatever happened, and she might be making a mistake about this. So we can't trust her. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo olam einon amenes. A woman that comes and says that her husband died, we never trust her unless Elam came basa beicha b'gedei akruin. If we mamish see that she's mourning her husband, that we see she's crying and her husband, her clothing is torn, that is, only then we trust her. But stam, a woman that comes and says her husband passed away, we don't trust her. Amrulai, Chachamim, said to Rabbi Yehuda, no, achazu v'achazu tinasei. Any time a woman comes, whether she's crying, whether she's not, she comes and says her husband passed away, we trust her. As long as it's not a situation where there's a war in the world, or there's a situation where there's a fight between the husband and wife here. Taneh, says the Gemara, we learned in the Braisa as follows. Now, before I read the Gemara inside, the Gemara is sort of clarifying a problem that we have here in the Lashon of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah is discussing a situation where it's peace in the world, or a situation where there's war in the world. We know that there's a war in the world, or we know that there is peace in the world. How about a situation where we know none of the above? We know nothing. It's stam. We don't know if there's a war in the world, and we don't know that there's peace either. We don't have any information. The same also regarding the peace between the husband and wife. The Mishnah was discussing a case where there was a fight between them, or they did get along, and there's shalom between them. How about if it's a stam case and we know nothing? So there's sort of a contradiction here in the Mishnah. So the Gemara brings a brayso that clarifies and says as follows: Shalom beinai lebeina. This that the Mishnah says that the only time we trust a woman to say that her husband died is when we know for sure that there was peace between them. It doesn't mean we have to know that. The only reason it says this expression is mishum tekabaya lemisni katata beinai lebeina. Later in the Mishnah it says that when there's a fight between them, we don't trust her. So as a contrast to that, it used the expression when there's peace amongst them. But even if we don't know for sure that there was peace amongst them, we can still trust her. The only time we don't trust her is if we know for sure that there was a fight between them. And similar also, Tana, we learned, Shalom Ba'ilam, when the Mishnah said that we know that there's peace in the world, even if we don't know. But Mishum the Kabayla Misni Mulchama Ba'ilam, because it was saying that when we know for a fact that there's a war, then we don't trust them. So it also used the expression that when there's peace, we do trust her. But even if we don't know, even if it's stam, then we don't know, we still will trust her. Now, Amar Rav explains the reason for the Mishnah here. My time of the Muhammad. What's the reason why when there's a war in the world we don't trust her? Because when she says her testimony about her husband passing away, she's imagining, she thought he passed away even though he didn't. And the Gemara explains what exactly is the mistake she could be making. In other words, the point is we're not actually accusing her of lying, but we're still not sure she's making a mistake. Why? So the Bacher adds one word. The Savra, she's thinking, Sal Kedaita, do you think, B'chal Hani de Iktel, who Palit, all these people that got killed, my husband got saved? How could it be? She sort of gave up and she's sure that he died with everyone else. And now, even in a case, even if you're going to say that Kivin the Shalom beinai lebeina, because they got along with one another, so therefore Natra, she is going to wait ad chazia, she's with her husband, and she's going to wait until she sees that he actually died. She's not going to let him go. But it's not necessarily true. Zim in the machale begire oy berumche, sometimes he was hit by a spear or by an arrow, and v'savra avade meis, and she sees that he fell and he definitely died. And but it's possible that someone then came and gave him some medicine or whatever, healed him, and he did live. So therefore we can't trust her. She can make a mistake about this. Now Rava thought to say, if it's a time period of a hunger, so then it's not like a war. Over here, if her husband died in a hunger, there's no mistake that she can make about this. And if she says he died, she's probably saying the truth that he died. That's what Rava thought first. But then Rava changed his opinion and he said, a time when there's a hunger, it's the same exact thing like a war, and we can't trust that she can make a mistake about this. And the Gemara says a story that happened. There was a woman that came in front of Rava, and Amrele, she said to Rava, Baili meis berav. Sorry, my husband passed away in a hunger. So Rava wanted to really see if what she's saying is true. So Rava says to her, Shaper of this, it's good what you did, to shave this nafsheich, that you saved yourself. When you left your husband and you ran away, you saved yourself. And Rava is telling her, do you think the Bahu Porta, the Nafafisa, the Shafkislei, do you think that with this little flower that you left him, have a chayah, that he would live with this little flower that you left him? So it's good that you left him. So in other words, Rava is like leading her on. Rava wanted to see if this is actually true, that she left her husband while he was still alive. Amrale, so she responds to Rava and says, Mar namiyada, you also know this, that the situation with this hunger, with the little food that we had and the little flour that we had, that it's impossible to live. So Rava in other words realized that his assumption was true, that when she left her husband, he was still alive. So therefore Rava retracted his opinion, that a hunger is like a war, that we can't trust her. And then Rava went actually a step further. In a time of a hunger, we actually could trust her even less than in a time of a war. In a time of a war, if she comes and says, my husband died in the war, we don't trust her. But if she comes and says that my husband died, he was lying in his bed and he passed away lying in his bed, we'll believe her. There's no again, we're not accusing her of lying. So if she says that, we're going to believe her. But when it comes to a hunger, we're not going to believe her even if she says that he died in his bed. Because maybe she saw him on a deathbed and he had very little food with him and she thought he died and he didn't. We're only going to trust her if she comes and says that she was verified that he's dead and she buried him. Only then are we going to trust her. Another situation, mapailes, if you had houses that were collapsing, it's also like a wartime. She thinks the house collapsed on her husband and he died. Shiluach nechashim v'akrabim. If there is a plague where you have snakes and scorpions that attack people, arein kamulchama. Also like a war. Damra b'didami. She also thinks that her husband died. Dever. If there's a plague or if there's a pandemic, right? Amra law. Amri law. So here there's an argument about this. Some say that this is just like a war, and she's going to say it as something which she's assuming, and she doesn't know. And others say that this can be compared to a war. Like Gemara explains, because she thinks that her husband died in the pandemic. Others say that it's not like a war. Why? Because she's not going to just say this without first knowing what she's speaking about, and she relies on this that people say. 7 years there was this plague amongst us. Nobody died before their time. Hashem only takes away the life of those people that it came their time. So therefore, she's not going to come and say that my husband probably passed away. She's going to only say it if it's verified, because people say that nobody dies before their time, including in a time when there's a plague.